when I entered the working world, there was a popular TV series called Entourage on HBO. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it was about an up-and-coming actor who was moving to Hollywood with his friends. I think it was loosely based on the life of Mark Wahlberg. And one of the central characters was his agent, Ari Gold. Ari was a very outsized personality. The show made him a very likable person, well, somewhat likable person. He was not the antagonist. And he had a very direct, autocratic, in-your-face type of leadership. Just to give you an anecdote of his leadership style, he ran that agency that employed agents, and there were a group of agents in a room, and they were having lunch. So he marches into the room, and he said, let's play a game. Let's play Hangman, where you have to guess out a sentence. So he starts putting some lines on the board, and I think he realized at that moment this would take too long, so he looked at the guy and he said, what do you think this says? And he started fumbling for words, and he said, it says, you're fired. Get out. And the guy looked at him like, is this a joke? And he said, no, this is not a joke. Get out now. You're fired. And it had more expletives than that, but that's just an example of his leadership style. I'm almost ashamed to say I wanted to be like that when I saw that that show. It was more than that. He had just very type A, very direct, very hard charging. But I have since learned that I am not like that. And taking leadership tests and also just observing my own leadership style, I have observed that I'm more of a democratic, almost the opposite. Hey guys, what do you think? What should we do? I want to get input from multiple people and kind of help push the group ahead from the middle, if you will, or from the back sometimes. And which is very different from the Ari Gold type of leadership. I could not foresee at that time that I would want something or be different than that. But I've come to learn that that leadership style can be toxic and is not always the best way to lead people forward. But there are some things that I want to take from that and other leadership styles. Two things actually. One idea that I want to take is directness. Type A, autocratic leaders can be very direct, almost to a fault at times. At a previous job, a few years back, I was given a brief to a group of sailors and Marines. After the brief, my Marine Corps boss said to me, how do you think that brief went? And I demurred and said, probably not good. And he was like, yeah, it didn't go good. You're not a good leader. You need to get better. And in that moment, it was so weird because I was kind of happy, but kind of sad at the same time. Sad because I didn't give a good brief. I had a long way to go to become a better briefer, but happy because never in my life has someone been that direct with me to tell me exactly what my fault is and to talk about how we're going to improve that fault. And from there on, he put me into multiple briefs. I briefed probably hundreds of times just under his leadership working at that job. I really enjoyed that directness. And I think that can be hard for a democratic leader at times to be direct, tell people exactly what you think, and that is something that I want to develop. Another trait that I want to develop is honesty, transparency. I don't know the exact word for that. I'm sure there is an exact word for that, but I use those two words because it's not just one or the other. In my most previous job, I had a boss who was fired. And on the cover of Navy Times fired, a commanding officer fired, and if you're not in the Navy, we call it Navy crimes. Whenever you get fired or get sacked, you get on this on the front of cover of this magazine, and they talk about what you did if they know. And so I had a really good job there, but in the Navy you have your main job and you have collateral duties, a bunch of them. And one of my collateral duties I thought was awesome. I was facilitator for the board of directors. So all the senior members of the hospital, they sit on this board, the commanding officer sits at the front table, and I was sitting in the corner right there, and my only job was to take notes. So I got to hear what everyone's saying and thinking, and I had to do nothing else except just take notes. So on his last day there, he said to the group, this is my last day here. I am going to be fired. And members of the group said, oh no, you might make it, and but he said, no, I'm going to be fired. I did something that if I were in my boss's shoes, I would fire me. I cannot judge Marines and sailors having done what I've done. And this is going to be my last day here. And he talked a little bit more about it, and he gave his rationale, but he was very direct, but very transparent and very honest. And that struck me. I remember that like it was yesterday, because he didn't have to do that. He could have just went about his business. The admiral would have came out, fired him, and he would have been out that day, and no one would have never known the difference. We would have just known what the news said. It was not, I believe, his responsibility to give a transparent view of what was going on, what was happening, and how he saw the future. And I took that, and to this day I think about it, being transparent in moments where you don't have to be vulnerable, in moments where it doesn't necessarily call for it, but it allows people to see a different side of you, see a human side of you, and I think that that is important. I have taken that, and I think about that experience often. I am glad that we can grow and see that some of our childhood heroes are not exactly who we wanted to be. But I'm also glad that we can see in different experiences we have traits that are valuable for our own leadership experiences, and things that we could bring in, traits, attributes that we could bring in. I hope I can continue to grow and continue to bring in leadership traits that I see around me, and also continue to develop in my own leadership style. Thank you very much.
Jonathan, I think this was your best speech yet. And your objective for this speech was to share some aspect of a chosen leadership style, or leadership styles in general, and discuss your style preferences. However, you had another objective, which was to not use your notes. And I think that because you didn't use your notes, you gave your best speech yet. It really showed in your confidence. I mean, you stepped back from the lectern. You had wonderful body language, use of gestures, vocal variety, great examples of stories that brought your points in. Stellar. I'd like to tell you a couple more things you excelled at, what you may want to work on, and one thing to challenge yourself. The humor was great. Again, the no notes, that was awesome. And using the two things, very clear. Your organization in the speech was very clear. So two things, directness and honesty or transparency. As you having, they were the things that helped you understand your leadership style. And that was one of the things I thought you excelled at too, was this whole speech was about you understanding your style. And so by having those two from other people, I thought was great. To work on, as you were concluding, I did notice you looking at your phone, and I'm not sure if it was because of your time, that it was time. Okay, I didn't know if you had your notes on your phone or what, but just at the end you kind of lost your flow a little bit because you looked at your phone. A few that Daniela might tell you about, so those are the things to work on. I'd like you to challenge yourself by adding a third trait or thing, because as Toastmasters and giving speeches, we like to do things in threes. So that would be my challenge for you. But I foresee more inspiring speeches from you, Jonathan. Thank you very much.